Welcome to Ecommerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-commerce.
What's going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz here, back again with another Ecommerce Conversations. Hope all's going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of me here in Austin, Texas, Will Roman with Chisos.
Howdy, howdy.
Did I say it right?
That's close. I like it. Chisos boots out like the mountains out in West Texas.
West Texas. Where is that's by El Paso, or
It's in the West, yeah. There's
it's a big state, you know.
it's like 8 hours from Austin, maybe 4.5 hours south of El Paso.
Okay.
So it's way out there.
Did you go there? Is that where you got the inspiration for the name, or?
Yes and yes. I have been going out to the Chisos Mountains for over a decade. It's kind of where I go to recharge and get out of the city. And I was out in West Texas when started down this rabbit hole.
Oh, sweet. Now, Chisos, is it Chisos.com or ChisosBoots.com?
Chisos.com.
Wow.
Yeah,
How expensive was that?
Not much. So originally it was going to be a lot. I looked it up, and you're getting started. We're bootstrapped, and so we didn't have a bunch of VC money to throw at things like domain names. So I actually reached out to the owners and was like, "Hey, how much for this?" And they were like, way too much money.
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, let me check with the wife." And so then I would get on the phone with them, and I would put on an accent, and I'm like, "This is a lot for a hobby site. You had this for a long time." And they'd be like, "Well, it's going to be this much." And it was about 6 weeks, and I got it for 10% of what they were originally asking.
Oh, wow. Nice. But it's still pretty expensive.
No.
Oh, okay.
I guess this is a business audience. We paid $900 for it, and they wanted almost $10,000 at the beginning.
But even $10,000, I feel like, is a great price for it.
I probably would have paid that, but, I'm so glad I didn't.
Did you give him a pair of shoes?
No, this is before we even had any of that. This is before we were a business. This is way back in the day.
Well, that is a lot of money then. Like, if you don't have a business.
Yeah, no, this was an idea, and I had the name almost immediately.
Yeah.
So going out and spending $10,000 on just a whim is not something I would do lightly.
Yeah. Do people resonate with the name? Do they know what it stands for?
We have huge fans of the Chisos Mountains that are connected to the boots.
Yeah.
It's a special place. You haven't been out there?
Well, I've been as far as Marfa.
Okay. You went to the hipster.
The hipster? Yeah. Well, I mean, look at me.
So it's, I could wax poetic forever, so I won't. But the Chisos are so unique because the Big Bend National Park in West Texas is, 800,000 acres plus of high desert right on the border with Mexico. All the things that come along with the border are all happening there as well.
Okay.
And then the middle of it is this mountain range that's fully encapsulated in the park. And when you're in the mountains, it feels like you're in Colorado. It looks like you're in Colorado.
Yeah.
And yet...
are there pine trees and stuff?
There's pine trees.
No way, really?
Yes.
In West Texas.
In West Texas. But it smells a little different. It sounds a little different. And it's this very odd, ethereal... You just have to go.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go. So, I know Joshua Tree has this kind of vibe to it.
Yes.
Have you been to Joshua Tree?
I have. It's very different than Joshua Tree.
Okay.
Joshua Tree is its own thing as well.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those places you have to go to. And I think the Chisos Mountains have a similar majesty of contrast.
Yeah. So you get this idea for Chisos. You always knew it was going to be boots?
Yeah. So the origin of it is that I've worn boots my whole life. I'm a Texan. And in my 20s, I had a motorcycle accident. I had a couple of motorcycle accidents, but I had a bad one, and it messed up my back. And so wearing boots was painful, but we're stubborn in this state,
right,
as most people know. And so I would wear them anyway. And I was out in West Texas one day, looking down at my feet, end of a long day, my back is killing me. And I just had those famous last words like, how hard could it be? And so I originally wasn't like I'm going to start a business. It was just I really wanted a comfortable pair of boots. And I used to put inserts in them, and they were goofy from Walmart and all sorts of buy boots too big. And so I started cutting open boots. I cut open my own collection to see how they were made. And then I got a lot smarter. I was like, why don't I go to Goodwill and cut open their boots? This is becoming very expensive. But bought books at half-price books and Googled, and then started finding all the boot makers in Texas, and made my way down to Mexico and actually lived down there for 3 to 4 months learning the process. And anyway, I just ended up on this, like I said, it's a rabbit hole. It wasn't like I started out with this idea. It was I needed to solve this for myself. But the interesting thing is when I started, I started to make a comfortable boot. I want to solve the back problems. You used to have to go buy a boot that's basically a tennis shoe made in China versus a handmade boot, a really nice boot.
Right.
Well, when I started cutting open these other boots, I started finding out that those supposedly handmade boots were starting to use plastics.
Oh, really?
Starting to cut corners. It's kind of like Gibson in the 80s, right? You know, where like they just skated on their good name. They get acquired by a PE company and they're like, let's just cut the quality and no one will find out. And that's what's happening in the boot world. So ended up with this really comfortable, handmade, high-end cowboy boot that you can actually go out and work in and beat the shit out of it and then, you know, brush it off and go to dinner with a lady.
Yeah. I mean, this is a different company. I'm wearing some White's boots. It's out of Spokane, where I'm from, and it's the same thing. They just got like 4 layers of like leather on the bottom, and like it just breaks in to your foot, and it's just, while it's not like your typical foam or whatever, your tennis shoe, right? Your tennis shoe boot.
Yep.
But it's a high quality material that makes it much more comfortable, I assume. What do we have here? Oh my God.
So this is the Chisos number 2.
You guys can't see this, but I'm looking at one of his boots.
So this is, you know, there's some other things that we made some, describe that.
I love the smell of leather, so you missed me putting my nose like deep into the hole of this.
I hope that's on the excerpt from this.
Yeah. Put that on the transcript. Eric puts his nose deep in the hole of the boot.
You know, we'd like to do some interesting things with this too. So, I mean, you know, I did all the designs. You know, they're all based off of Big Bend. We don't use calfskin.
So is Big Bend in the Chisos?
The Chisos Mountains are in Big Bend National Park.
Okay.
And so everything about the boot is inspired by the region.
Okay. So it's got a very southwestern, like...
So there are these old petroglyphs in the park, these native rock carvings, and this is my interpretation of them.
Ah, it's so cool. And that's got to, I mean, I don't know anything about embroidery. I assume this is like a type of embroidery, right?
Correct. Yep. You know it.
And then, so you embroider it flat and then you sew it into the boot. I would imagine that adds quite a bit of time. And
you're looking at about 4 weeks of process here to make each one.
Just make one boot.
Or make a pair, but to make the pair.
Mike Lawson, our copywriter, who writes all of our blogs, he's a big boot fan. As you know, you met him. And we were looking at it before he came to your launch party, December 2019. And we were looking at the website. He's like, yeah, I like Chisos better than the other Austin brand because it's just like, I think he just called out the stitching's a lot more interesting. It's just like...
There's nothing on this that hasn't been rethought. You know, a lot of other companies in the boot world just so if you go down to Mexico, most quote handmade cowboy boots in America come from 4 factories in Leon, Mexico. Mm-hmm. They've got 350 people on the floor at one time. You can go down there and you can see a dozen different brands all coming off the same assembly line. They're all basically made the same.
Yeah, so you don't have to make your own last?
You're supposed to.
Okay.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. So you made your own wink,
We
wink.
did. No, we made our own.
Oh, really?
Though. So for this, here's the thing with everything on our boot has been done uniquely. Everything from the toe shape to the arch support. You know, again, this was me setting out to think about how do I wear this and then how do I make it last forever. So here's one thing that's really interesting. So if you look inside the boot, you know, down at the bottom.
Yeah, hammered in.
That's a thick leather insole. Now, if I was smarter, I would have brought you our boot cut in half. If you come by Chisos headquarters,
I'll have to do that.
We have them cut open. And it's 3 times as thick as something our competitors use. So you talk about that idea of like the leather taking the form of your foot.
Yeah.
We use things like channel welt, which means that we do leather all the way on the bottom. Most other people use canvas and glues. But what we did is we did bring in this idea of modern cushion.
Orthotics, yeah.
And so we have 4 different materials. This took an immense amount of effort to come up with. We're the only ones that have this combination, and it's all leather topped.
Yeah.
But because of the way we designed the boot, everything had to be restructured to accommodate this so it fits.
Yeah.
It also then...
Because this has got to be like 3/4 of an inch or...
It's around there. We do everything in the metric system.
Oh, sorry.
But but the insole, the leathers of the actual sewn in insole take your shape of your foot even through this. And that's one of the biggest things that we had to come up with is that other companies, everything's made on some big machine and there's no leather parts that are taking that old school form of your foot so it gets more comfortable over time. And we're the only ones who brought both together.
So the other thing that's interesting about this insert is you guys are still a bootstrap small company.
Absolutely.
And I look at this insert and in my brain, I think, okay, there's Chisos boots on it. So this is custom made, right? You know, like you had to manufacture this. And then you've got, I mean, how many sizes? Like 20 sizes or?
Sizes are the death of me, but
right. So like 20 sizes. So you'll have 40 versions
so here,
of these.
I'll tell you a little secret on these. So we have 3 molds.
Oh, and then you just trim like
and
the
we
edges.
cut. We cut to fit. And the molds, which was really complicated because usually you would make them per every size and a half. And so what we did though is we actually designed, again, we had to think about the whole system.
Right.
How do we, because your arch lands in a different place for each size. And so how does this accommodate all of those? And so it has a certain amount of support built in. The rest of it takes from the internal structure of the boot itself.
Okay. Yeah, that's
But here's a funny thing with this though. So people are always, they love our insoles and they're like, just make thousands of them. So
just get in the game of insole.
well, here's the thing that you think about, like Nike goes and makes an insole, right? It's all made on machines. When they can just run them out. But if it's raining outdoors, that changes the barometric pressure, which means that the curing temperatures and timing of things changes. And so if you're a big company, the machine does all that, right?
Right.
I have a big vat of goo and we pour it into the mold and clamp it shut and then, attach everything and then cut these things out. And so if we need to adjust for the pressure, we just go, done.
It's very artisanal.
I'm pleased that you think it looks, has a certain quality to it, that we work really, really hard to do that. And even these are done by hand.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. So it's cool to hear like how product oriented you are, how product, focused you are. And it wasn't like you just saw an opportunity for, cowboy boots on the marketplace and you just figured out how to make them.
We actually kind of do the opposite of what everyone's doing these days, which is the movement is plastics, canvas, outsource as much as possible, make it cheap. People want a cheap boot, and then when they wear it out, they throw it away. I made something that you should have for the next decade or two of your life at least.
Your family should have, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is something you can give to your kids. I mean, the way normal people will wear these, this is something that your grandkid will get handed down, which is a terrible business model.
So let's talk about that business model, because I would imagine tighter margins, right? The box for these are giant. Yeah. So it's not a pretty penny to ship, and you got free shipping for Texans.
We do.
Whether or not you're in Texas.
Correct. Yeah. If you're free shipping within the state, and if you're an ex-Texan, reach out and we will still honor it.
Yeah.
You got to have fun with it.
So, I mean, I assume the numbers work out, right? Like they
do.
Because your price is pretty competitive too. Because these boots, like I would imagine equivalent ones go for, $1,000.
Yeah, this is another big thing about the cowboy boot world, is that the pricing isn't transparent.
Yeah.
And you're right, though. We have a lot of converts from people that are paying $900, $1,000 for their cowboy boots. We also have a lot of converts come from people who are buying cheaper boots and then realize their mistake.
Well, they say you buy once or buy twice.
Yeah, there's a great saying about like I'm going to butcher it, but the thrill of a cheap price fades very quickly into the regret of low quality.
Yeah, so that's where you guys are. We also kind of talked about, speaking of product, here in Texas, it gets hot. You don't always want to wear cowboy boots. And on the days that you don't wear cowboy boots, somebody recognizes you.
Yeah. I'm wearing boots, 28 days out of the month, if I go work out or something, sometimes I still wear them. But I guaranteed someone will approach me on the one time that I'm not.
How do you've got 5 boots now?
Correct.
That's
plus some color variations, yeah.
Oh, you do. So your SKU count's getting up there with sizing.
Yes.
Like, how do you keep everything in stock? Are you able to like just be lean? I mean, let's walk through your operations a little bit. If you're open.
I'm open to it. Which is another thing about just kind of our approach, is that like, number one, rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah. And that what's the point of doing this if you're not doing it in community?
Well, do you like copyright this design?
Our toe bug, is very unique. It's
like a Thunderbird.
It's very close to a Thunderbird. It looks like a Thunderbird. It's actually it's a falcon.
Okay.
Big Ben has peregrine falcons, which are the fastest animal on the planet. They're incredible. So, there's a de facto copyright that applies by creating and producing. There's a question of, can you trademark different things? I think the number one thing when it comes to this world is becoming known for something. We've already had a competitor is attempting to copy some of the things that we're doing. But, honestly, I'm just not worried about it. I'm not setting out to be $1 billion business. I'm setting out to build a community, and the people are wild about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I could go on and talk about that.
Well, so let's talk about the future. I love talking about the future. So
it's an exciting place, the future.
You got Chisos.com.
Yes.
You're not married to boots. Does that mean you guys, like, I see a Chisos water koozie, and I saw your wallet had Chisos on it as well.
Yeah.
Are those like in the works, or?
Those are all things that we're adding. So
is it becoming a lifestyle brand? And if so, like, what is that lifestyle?
Yes, I think that it started there. I think that having a better product is table stakes. We've innovated. Well, I hate that word. Whatever. We created something new,
Yeah.
and we created what I have the luxury of that. The customer is me. I just make what I want, and I want things a certain way. And so the boots reflect that. I wanted a certain type of wallet. I couldn't find it on the market, so I made one, and those are coming out. Same thing with other items. But Chisos represents a certain approach to life. We're hugely Texas centric. We have on our, I'm holding up the boot here for the listeners, where our heel stamp on the bottom of our heels is the shape of Texas. It's not our logo. It's Texas. And Chisos gives, a portion to everything we give to Texas Land Conservation. We're pretty big on that, actually. We want these wild places to keep existing. But the people that come to Chisos care about craft. You could go and get something that was made easier and made quicker. I had this great conversation with this community group forum thing on Facebook, and someone had called in and they were like, I want to make sure that I get a perfect pair. I don't want anything. I'm like, this is a handmade product. You know what I mean? You want that variation. You want a machine will make a perfect stitch every time, but a human won't. And you want that character and that level of craft. And this is the other big thing, is that people who buy them to use them.
Right, you want them to break in.
They're not going to be perfect until they're covered in shit, and you've got scars from that time you fell off, your motorcycle, or you misstepped on that ledge. But, they're a good tool enables you to be a better person. And one of the things that's super awesome about boots is that people who wear boots is that it's almost like pulling on a uniform. There's this sense of responsibility that comes with wearing boots. Think about in Houston, and when Harvey came through and the guys driving trucks around in boats and trying to pull people out, you look around, there's people are wearing boots, and that's the type of person that is drawn to Chisos. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a rancher. We got guys who work, you work office
City
jobs,
boys,
city boys too, but there's a certain approach to life. And I think that is what Chisos represents. And so customers have been practically demanding that we come out with more things, which we are, but we're doing it slowly. We're doing it intentionally with every piece that we come out with.
Yeah. Will's on Twitter as well. I bring up Twitter a lot on this show. I love the Twitter.
Don't tell anybody.
I love the Twitter community. But I had a tweet recently about generational wealth. And you mentioned that you're kind of interested in exploring that and what that means. And are you married or?
I'm not married.
Okay. So you got to work on that, that second generation.
I got to work on that. But one of the other things that with the people, we have other makers that are in our community, and we have people, we support them and them sharing their things. We're all attempting to make our way in the world. I come from a background that, and I'll share more of the details with you offline personally, but where means was not something available to us, and in some extreme ways. And so one of the things, some people have these midlife crises, and there's this joke about having your quarter life crisis, and
have them early and often.
Well, one of the funny things about that is that a good analogy is when you're starving and someone throws you an apple, you just eat it. You don't stop to think about, well, maybe I don't want an apple, But once you're at a place, and that was my beginning of my life, is that it wasn't this consideration of what am I going to do? You just did what was in front of you that would get you out, get you a step forward. And by the time I was in my 20s, I got to this point where, I was able to start thinking about, well, maybe I don't like apples. Maybe I want oranges. Maybe I want a steak. Maybe I want something different. And trying to think of where I was going, but I was still very much month-to-month type existence. And so there's this idea to me of exit velocity, of, getting out of the Earth's gravitational pull is the hard part. Once you're out there, little thrusters, you can move around and go where you want. And so I've been very, very focused on that exit velocity piece, but also in a way that continues on. That is what I want to do every day. Chisos is not, this is not a build to sell.
Right.
This is the thing that I want to do for the rest of, what I can think forward. And the ways I'm building that into it are that it's community focused. We can introduce new products when we want to.
You enjoy using the products. I think that's one of the biggest
course.
things about building a business is when you enjoy the products, it just makes it so much more fun. You just don't want
to. And it took me a while to learn that.
Yeah.
Well, it took me a
while.
while.
I don't think you have to. I think there are people who do love the business, right?
Sure.
And maybe not the product they're selling, but it makes it a lot more fun when you can use all the things that you're selling.
Agreed. And I'm the product person as opposed to the person who wants to run the business. You know, there's a piece of that that's fun. There's the competitive piece of me gets lit up by that. But really, I want to make things I'm proud of, and I want to share them with people, and I want to share those experiences. And from the, financial planning perspective, I'm trying to catch up on the education side of, okay, I'm not at this place yet, but I can see a path forward to, I'm going to get to a point where, okay, now I need to start thinking about how do we manage this? How do we make sure that this stays around for my kids and my future family? And that's a thought that, it never had before. Like, it's almost like that cliche of like, you thought you'd be dead by 40 type of thing, right? I think I honestly just in the back of my mind was like, yeah, I'm just not going to be around that long. So like the whole like compounding interest and blah, blah, it never sank in. I wasn't brought up with that type of thinking. And now you got me going. So you'll have to cut off this mic in a minute. But there is this thing that I think is interesting about a lot of the wealth management that is taught, or not really taught, it's yelled down at people from a certain class, is exactly that. It's wealth management. And we look up going, what wealth are you talking about?
Yeah.
And, this idea of like balancing your portfolio. And I'm like, first of all, I don't have a portfolio, even if I were to balance it. But there's this thought that I've recently realized that I did by accident, which is that I have gone all in. This is like my multiple ventures, but this is the one I think that it's going to go somewhere. It's going to stick. Is that every time I've gone all in, and the way to create wealth is you have to take these big bets.
Yeah.
And you might strike out, but if you hit it, you've gotten somewhere. Whereas if you put, 5% in, it doesn't matter if it's a home run, you're only going 5% around the bases.
Well, I think there's, we're pulling up my old financial advisor days, but I think it's like you make your money in your business, right? And then you preserve your money. Wealth preservation is kind of how I look at it. So it's like a way to just make sure that it continues for multiple generations.
Well, and when the thing that from my side is that people would attempt to tell me maybe the wealth preservation side of things, but it didn't apply to me because I didn't have any wealth to preserve. And so I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of good practices in general. And, you got to grow up sometime.
But I mean, I think it's pretty cool to commit to something. I think it's a requirement to find the success that you had. Now, you're 100% owner, or do you have
100%.
business? Talk about how challenging that can be, because how do you bounce ideas off of people, or how do you lift yourself up when you're in the dumps?
Great questions, especially as we enter, I'm about 2 years into this venture, and, you can run on adrenaline for a long time, but eventually it catches up to you. To be honest, I'm figuring out that support system, especially with this past year of being removed from like your auxiliary, weak ties and the people that you used to see at the grocery store and that type of stuff. It's been intentional. We have a good friend, Jimmy.
Jimmy Hayes has been on this podcast. So for y'all listening, shout out to Jimmy.
Jimmy Hayes, Manal, all that great guy. And so we have like a recurring call. It's another, small business owner. And there are things that it takes another small business owner to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real struggle. One of the things that I have this written down actually on the side of my office or on my desk where, if I'm feeling bad, I go, okay, like, have you slept 8 hours for a past week? Have you eaten? Have you exercised? And have you seen somebody you love?
Yeah.
And
that's great advice, man, right? That is incredible advice.
Well, very often the answer is no, right? Because I go, like, I'm feeling like dirt, and I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I haven't done any of the things that are required to feel good.
What did you have for lunch? It was a cheeseburger and fries.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's about when I was younger, I could literally physically throw my body into a brick wall, bounce off of it, and I was fine. And I could do that day in and day out, and I didn't have to pay my body any attention whatsoever. And I do now.
Yeah.
And I've resisted it for a long time because I think it challenged a sense of my identity of being indestructible or something silly. And now I haven't done it completely, but I'm working to embrace this idea of, hey, there's maintenance. Just like you're a good like I'm a good steward of my truck, I'm a good steward of my business and my employees, and like I need to be a good steward of myself as well.
Well, you put good things on your feet. Yeah. Are you still dealing with foot pain or
the back pain?
The back pain.
So these are the only boots I can wear, to be honest. But the back pain is a great issue. I'm solving it once and for all. I tried to outsource that. This is a great conversation about responsibility, actually. So for the longest time, I would just look at a doctor or a specialist of some sort and be like, fix it. And then I would, wanted to focus on other things like the business. And I would have these episodes where it would come back in extreme ways. And so I had one earlier this year, and it actually was the best thing that ever happened to me because the light bulb just finally went off. That was like, this is your responsibility It's nobody else's. No one's going to do it for you. And if you would just put the amount of effort into solving this as you did to building a boot company, for instance, you could figure it out.
So you start doing some squats.
One of the things was that, we don't have to go into all the details, but like the issue wouldn't show up on imaging. There were all these things. And so I have an actual diagnosis now and we're going on it. But I really can't complain because this company wouldn't exist without it.
Right.
So it's kind of, there's some silver linings there.
Yeah. I mean, so I lift weights pretty regularly with another friend of mine. And that's usually, we're either bitching about like light bulbs and replacing them or like what part of our body is hurting. And I haven't even hit 40 yet. So I can't imagine what the next 10 years are going to look like.
I think they're going to be good though, because I think that like we've woken up to it. I think that if I had gone to 40 and it continued to ignore it, my 40s and 50s would be awful.
Yeah.
But I'm actually super hopeful right now.
Yeah, you should be. Well, that's exciting. Where can people learn more about Will Roman?
Well, I try and hide as much as I'm just kidding. Will Roman is everything's about Chisos now. So you can get us Chisos.com, obviously. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. We have a lot of videos. The coolest thing that I think I've ever done is when I told you at the beginning that I started cutting open boots to figure out how they were made, people are like, well, that's super interesting. I'd like to see that. So we made this epic video where we chop open our boots. We also chop open a couple of our competitors.
You know the guy Rose Anvil?
Oh, yeah.
Have you sent him stuff yet?
We've chatted.
Okay.
Rose seems like a great guy.
Weston K, I guess is his name.
There was a opportunity for us to sponsor something, and that's just not how we operate. So,
yeah. But
yeah, he had seen the one that we did actually, and then reached out.
Yeah. He seems like a nice guy.
He's a super nice guy. He's got a business ball, and we're bootstrapping. So.
Yeah.
So we did that. We did a follow-up where I took him out to a ranch, and there's a...
you met him in person?
No. I'm saying it's our video.
Oh,
so we did our video, which people love it. And then the first one was basically like, let's cut open our boots. Let's cut open other boots. Show you how they're made. Show you why we're different. Like no pulling, no punches. Like here's the proofs in the pudding, so to speak. And so the next one was, well, I went up to a buddy's ranch and I was like, what if we like towed them behind a Humvee and used them to pull a truck? And then I was like, well, I have all this tannerite in my truck. So I blew them up with an AR-15 and a whole shit ton of tannerite and gasoline, and it's all on slow-mo.
Yeah.
So you can go Google that, and that's what you should really worry about, not who will Roman.
Is your YouTube channel Chisos?
Yeah, YouTube/Chisos.
Oh man, you got all the good URLs, huh?
We got it on Instagram. We don't have Twitter. We have so whoever's at Twitter, hook it up. We need that one.
Yeah, you got the trademark though, right?
Yeah.
Also, go buy a pair of boots. Everyone needs a good pair of cowboy boots, right?
Everyone does need a good pair of cowboy boots. Absolutely.
Sweet, man. Well, thanks for coming by the show. I hope you guys listening were able to learn a couple things. I think the reminders about lifting weights or eating right or sleeping well or hanging out with people you love is probably some of the best advice I've heard in a long time. So I appreciate you sharing that. As always, thanks for listening. Cheers.
Thanks, Jack.
And keep on growing.